Hi, everyone. I'm Summer,
I'm Carrie.
and this is Hopelexia Podcast.
Join us to talk about sex, drugs, and self-improvement.
Oh, but I found out. Okay, so my ADHD, my parents apparently knew about it when I was little, and I did not realize they had put me on Ritalin for a little while. And since I'm not normally very hyperactive, the Ritalin kicked in the hyperactivity instead of like calming down my speaking and like my speaking patterns and all that. So I still didn't sleep anymore. And then also I talked all the time, but now I just couldn't sit still. So they took me off of it. They didn't mention it until like I don't know, I was at some point in high school, I think. And I mentioned the fact that I was like, I think I might have ADHD. And my mom was like, well, yeah, you do. And I was like, what do you mean? Yeah, I do. She's like, you had ADHD ever since those doctors told us when you were little. And I was like, why didn't you ever tell me this? She's like, well, I thought you knew. I was like, no. And she's like, well, you were the one that they gave the pills to. And I'm like, what? I was like, I took meds for this? And she was like, yeah, they were terrible. We took you off of them like within a couple of weeks because it was so bad. And I was like, that's crazy, which I should have known whenever. Okay, so I had a friend named Kelly. Okay, went to a very small school in the middle of nowhere. So the preschool that I went to used to lock the kids that were a little too hyperactive in a closet together, which you would think would be abuse, but it was all of us with me and my friends that I like playing with inside of a small closet for like a couple of hours so that they could get relaxation outside handling the other kids. And we would just run circles inside that closet. So we didn't know any better until they locked one of us in there. Yeah. They locked one of us in there and forgot to take them out and then went home. And he was in there until like 3 a.m. And then the school got shut down.
Well, yes. Thank goodness.
I went to middle school. And one of those same kids got locked in a closet in middle school because the teacher he didn't get locked in the closet. They would just put him in the closet. His desk was in the closet because he couldn't work well with the other kids.
I don't really think that's better.
In closets.
Small towns, man. Small towns.
And apparently it's kind of universally accepted in that town for, this many people to be doing it to the kids.
Yeah, right. And one of them, Kelly, whenever they would put him in the closet, like they didn't like me and him to be around each other because we would not stop talking and joking and stuff. So they put him in the closet. I was less hyperactive, so they could sit me in a chair. They just had to like keep me focused on my work, which I was always getting done with the homework faster. So then they hated it because they were like, go help somebody else. And I hated helping other people because I want to play on the computer. That's why I got done with my homework really fast. They had Oregon Trail and I wanted to play it. But Kelly, every time the teacher would leave the office, leave the classroom for a minute, he would like, okay, so the closet that he was in was just a big storage closet for supplies, but there was another closet there that was where all the school costumes were at for plays and stuff. And Kelly knew how to pick locks. And because me and him both had criminal families, so we know a bunch of shit that the other kids didn't know.
That was what I was going to ask is where did Kelly come across this knowledge? So, okay, that makes sense.
Like majority of my family criminals, majority of his family criminals, so you learn things. Anyway, he would he comes out of there one time and he's dressed as Abraham Lincoln and he's got 2 like cap guns and he's just firing them like all crazy. And then immediately the teacher walks in and he like shuts the door and goes back inside and she didn't see what happened and we're all just dying laughing. So then it became a thing that every time she would leave the room, Kelly would come out of there in a different costume. One time he comes out it's like Uncle Sam with an American eagle on his shoulder and he comes out and starts giving a speech he found. And it's just a Declaration of Independence, but he's giving it like a speech, and things like that. I mean, it was great.
That's the best, minus being locked in the closet. I don't like that.
It was a cool closet. Yeah. I was jealous of him in his closet. I was like, can I be locked in the closet with Kelly? She was like, no.
I just
no closet time for you.
I heard a weird noise and it scared me. I don't
know. Is it the fairies? It's the fairies.
It sounded like a mason jar lid pop. I don't have any mason jars in my room.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
You don't keep moonshine laying around?
No.
Oh, you're missing out.
I have actually stopped drinking for the most part because it makes me feel gross.
Yeah.
I don't really drink much lately either because of my inflammation issues with everything else. It just aggravates it. But Moonshine is a very handy thing to keep around, though.
I do like
It has a million uses.
I just But anyway, enough talking about the scary noise in my room.
Well, he mentioned his parents not telling him about the ADHD.
Oh yeah.
What is with these parents? Like my parents, I'm just now in my 40s realizing like there is actually something wrong with my joints. My knee has been out for like a few years, and they're like and so apparently like my ligaments aren't holding my joints in place like they're supposed to, right? And so it's continually just randomly dislocating is what's happening. And now my wrist is doing the same thing. And I would, I told my parents, and they're just like, yeah, it's just going to keep getting worse as you're older. And that's just the extent of what they had to say. And it finally occurred to me, I was born with my legs twisted, and they had to splint them. So I guess those connective tissues could kind of draw up and hold everything in place like it was supposed to. So like they've literally known since day one there was something wrong with me, and literally never had the conversation of, hey, you need to pay attention to this. Like had I known, I could have prevented a lot of injuries, but I had no idea because they're just like, oh no, everybody's joints do that. Our whole family does. Like it's not normal.
Right. It's hard for families to distinguish genetic issues. Like, okay, so my sister, I was telling her about how my knee is always sore. My right knee is always sore. And I was like, it's weird. It like pops out of place and all this kind of stuff all the time. And she was like, yeah, that's what happened with my left knee. And then she starts telling me about it. And she's like, yeah, the doctor found out that like one of my legs is a little shorter than others. And she's like, it's because mom's leg is shorter than others. Now she's telling me this, and she's acting like she just found this out, but it's apparently been several years that she's known this. And she's like, oh, yeah, you might want to have that looked at. And I'm like, so then I lay down I go over to her house. I'm like cutting this story really bad. But I go over to her house, and she's like, well, just lay down on the ground, and I'll show you what the doctor did. And she measured my legs, and one of my legs is half an inch shorter than the other one, which I was like, oh, okay. So now I got to put like lifts on one side of my leg to keep the joint from overextending on one side and taking all the pressure. Which I'm like, makes sense on a lot of things that I have noticed throughout my life and thought, wow, man, I kind of walk weird.
My grandma's was like that. Hers was shorter than the other. But, I don't think anybody ever thought to actually check that on any of us.
You should check that now.
Right?
Yep.
Now I'm like, I wonder if that's why it's primarily one side that's been the problem, which would make sense, right? Because if you're compensating.
Yeah, the leg that is longer will get more pressure put on it all the time, right? So then you got to put the lifts in the other one so that it balances out.
To look into that, because now that you mention it, nobody's ever evaluated any of us for that.
You should be the first.
Have everybody lay down, like, let me measure your legs.
I'm just gonna measure everybody.
But then, keeping the tradition going, you don't tell any of them what the results are.
Right? You'll just have to figure it out.
You don't remember that? I measured your legs like 3 years ago. Why have you not kept up with this?
That's exactly what I should do, because I remember having the conversation, like when we went to when you play sports at school, which was required for us for several years, you have to do the physical, right, every year. And I remember the doctor saying stuff like, oh, they're gonna need additional like ankle support, and we always had knee braces. But it was presented to me like all kids need this. Although now it makes sense why I was the only one on the fucking team who had it.
It's it's weird how I don't know how they do things whenever you're kids, and even as an adult, like the things that they don't tell you, like doctors will have you check stuff, and then they're like, now I think they've gotten much better. I remember whenever I was younger, they would not really explain the tests they're doing. They're just like, oh, we do this with everybody. Oh, we do this with everybody. Mm-hmm. And then like now I've got a doctor that actually like, we do this because, and then they explain to me, because I'm going to ask you like a million fucking questions if you don't tell me what it is. Because when I was younger, I wouldn't ask those questions. I didn't think you were really supposed to. I thought the doctor was just supposed to come in and tell you stuff. And if you needed to know, you needed to know. Other than that, they were just doing their normal tests. Now it's like I ask the doctor about everything. I mean, anything at all that I think is any bit interesting to ask about, like anything I'm intrigued by, which is almost every damn thing. So,
Same.
like, I'll
Yeah.
ask them about something. I'm like, hey, I need you to look at this mole on my toe. I don't know. It wasn't there a couple of years ago, I don't believe. Like, and now I noticed it, and I'm like, I don't think that's supposed to be there. Can you look at it? And they're like, oh, I'm not a dermatologist, but it looks fine, kind of thing. Yeah, it's. I don't know I know where I was going with it. I'm going to stop myself before I go there. There's some places I've asked doctors about, and I have found that women have gynecologists, and y'all can go see a gynecologist, and they will answer any question for you. Urologist, you don't really see unless you have to, and the regular doctor does not want to check out anything for you that you have questions about.
Fair
Yeah.
enough, I guess.
Because I'm like, I was telling my doctor's younger than I am by like 10 years, I think. And I was telling him, I was like, I've never had kids. I've never had a baby scare. I don't wear protection. So I'm like, how has this come about? Am I infertile? This kind of thing. And I'm like, like I pointed out some things women have pointed out down there, and like, testicle size and all this kind of stuff. So it's an awkward conversation to have with y'all. But anyway, I pointed this out to him, and I was like, would you mind looking? And then the doctor's like, well, I'm just going to take your word for it. And I'm like, no. I don't
want to
Not what I asked.
I don't think that's how it works. Like, do you want me to come in with like pictures? No. Okay. Do you want me to like draw on a scale of what I think mine are versus somebody else's, and maybe that's an infertility thing? Well, I don't know if that has anything to do with infertility. I'm like, you're a doctor, and I've read about this. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure it is. So anyway, yeah.
That's a whole different doctor, I think.
That's an interesting rabbit trail just took you on there.
It's fine. It happens. We're used to that.
No, I figured if there was anybody to talk about it with, it was you guys.
I mean,
That's fair.
we have had much more awkward conversations on here. It's fine.
Oh yeah. No, I've seen.
Yeah. A lot of it we can't even post. So.
Oh yeah. No, I remember the Indian clinics when I was younger. They used to be like so bad. Like it was scary going there because like the one in Talahina was really hit and miss because of the doctors that were there. And like one of my cousins worked as a nurse there, and she would constantly tell me like, oh, you're getting this doctor. What are you going to see him about? Okay, you'll be fine. All right. Just don't see him about anything about like, these kind of things. She'd always tell us like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and refer you over to this doctor instead because you don't want to see that doctor about this kind of thing. Because like they would do things like my sister came in with Russian mumps once, and they didn't know what Russian mumps was, which is one of those obscure, not very common thing anyway. So they just sent her home and was like, okay, if this isn't gone in a couple of weeks, go to an ER. And like, we're like, this is the only ER in our area. So it's like, we're going to come back here. But they're like, we don't know what this is. It could be contagious. Please leave.
Go home and hope for the best. We're going to take the ignore it and hope it goes away approach.
Yeah.
Yeah. The clinics were terrifying when it was still strictly IHS clinics. Because that's the thing other people don't realize about IHS. And it's the same way at the VA. Like the majority of because of the way the federal funded program works, the majority of the doctors that are working at these facilities are fresh out of medical school as part of an agreement where they pay for their medical school. And then you have to work for, I think, 5 years or whatever for them. Or
those are the ones.
The discipline. Yes, the ones who are on probation. Their medical license it's part of their disciplinary action is they have to give so much service to these clinics. So it's like literally malpractice.
It's like, how many malpractices do you have to have before you work at an Indian clinic? About 14. About 14 lawsuits at one time. There was a doctor that I used to go to, and I was like, this guy still works here. I remember being a teenager, and everybody was terrified to get him. And whenever I was an adult, I went down to Idabel or Broken Bow. I can't remember where that hospital's at. But
Idabel, the bigger ones in Idabel.
And I went there, and they told me his name, and I was like, did he used to work at Talahina? And they're like, yeah. I was like, do y'all have another doctor I could see? Because I'm like, I know this guy. I knew how many malpractices. He had like 14 whenever he came to the clinic because they were basically wanting to take his license away, but he agreed to work. And that was the one my cousin was always like, If it's something major, do not see this guy. If it's something like minor, like, colds, flus, something like that, he's fine. But if it's anything major, like you might have to have surgery down the road, you do not want to see this guy because he's going to recommend surgery when you don't need to, or not recommend surgery when you need it. He's really terrible. And I was like, oh, good to know.
That's terrifying.
For real.
Yeah.
When we were kids, it was like regular. It happened there, like it. Well, it seemed like it was happening on a regular basis for people to just die in the waiting room
Yeah.
at the clinic.
I remember I got snake
And like
bit.
nobody noticed. What? What kind of snake bit you?
Copperhead. And
What did you do to said snake?
I ran
to get
over it with a
bit?
tricycle. I was a little kid. I was too big to be riding a tricycle, which was what I thought was amusing about it, because I was like, oh, this is funny. So I was going to ride around and show my dad me on this little kid's tricycle. And
You
it was
fucked around and
nighttime.
found out, didn't
Yeah, I
you?
fucked around and found a snake. I thought I got stung by a bee, and I was like, wow, this bee really fucked my leg up. And then we go into the hospital, and there was a kid there that had rode so it's emergency room, middle of the night, Talahina. The nurse that took us in was the only one in the ER because there was a kid that got there right before me that was riding a dirt bike and had done a jump and landed on a T-post, and it went through him. So all the doctors were in there trying to like remove this T-post from him, and it managed not to hit any of his organs. So, he ended up fine, but that left me with a nurse. And this was her first, I think her first week in the ER. And this was her first week at the hospital. And they just all left her, and they were like, okay, well, it's snake bite. They told her what they thought she should do. And then they went back in there because they're like, we got to deal with this kid. So she comes in there and she gives me antivenom. Well, she didn't test to find out if I was allergic to antivenom. I am. And I swole up and I couldn't breathe and everything. So then she calls poison control because she couldn't get into the room where they were at. So she calls poison control. They're like, well, you should give him something that's an inflammatory, like Tylenol. So she gave me Tylenol, and it turns out I'm allergic to, in ER, they keep the Tylenol with codeine in it. Turns out I'm allergic to codeine. I swole up and I quit breathing completely. And also she goes to give me adult dosages for both. She just panicked. And anyway, at some point in the middle of the night, once the doctor came in there and kind of got me back conscious and everything, she came up to me, and when she was saying something, and I was like, she was trying to stick me with something else. And I was like, if you stick me with that, I'm going to throw you out this window. And she still remembers me. It's like, the last time I went to one of those hospitals down there, I ran into her, and she's like, I remember you. She's like, you're a little kid that first week I was working. She's like, you told me you were going to throw me out the window. And yeah, I was like, oh, I remember you too. Don't stick me with anything. Stay away from me.
That's terrifying. Jeez,
Like,
that was a wild ride.
Could you possibly have worse luck?
For real.
Well, I mean, I live, so I mean, it's okay.
That's the bare minimum there.
Is it? Are we sure?
I mean, if I would have went away, I would have went away peacefully in my unconscious, and not necessarily sleep, but my sedated state.
This might be a Sixth Sense situation. We might need Haley Joe to come talk to you.
Oh, now, I was telling everybody, I'm like, I always tell people, I'm like, whenever I'm out and I'm hiking and stuff, I like hiking and everything. Whenever I'm out hiking, I can always tell when there's snakes nearby. And I'm assuming there's that musk that they put off or whatever. I'll know before anybody else does there's a snake nearby. I may not know exactly where it's at, but I'm like, there is a snake near here, guys.
You have snake
look
radar
for your legs. Now. Yeah. Look around your feet. They're going for the ankles. Look out for your ankles.
I'm that way with straight men. Oh God, the radar's
go for the ankles.
There's some nearby. Hide, take cover. All right, guys. Thank you very much for coming to talk to us, Victor. It was fun.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And to be sure you never miss an upload, make sure you turn your notifications on. And please come join us on social media so we can continue these conversations in between episodes. You'll find us at Hypoxia Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok.